On August 7, 1942, as dawn broke over the Solomon Islands, 11,000 U.S. Marines stormed the shores of Guadalcanal. Operation Watchtower marked the first major Allied offensive in the Pacific against Japan, launching a brutal 6-month campaign that would change the course of the war. Amid jungle combat and fierce naval engagements, a unique weapon quietly emerged, not of steel or firepower, but language. American forces confronted a deadly challenge. In the chaos of night patrols, with Japanese infiltrators sometimes speaking English and even wearing captured U.S. uniforms, how could Marines distinguish friend from foe? The answer lay in pronunciation. Specifically, the pronunciation of the letter L. Technical Sergeant James Hurlbut, a Marine Corps combat correspondent, documented the practice in a 1943 interview. He explained that passwords containing the letter L were used at checkpoints because the Japanese language lacks a true L sound. This linguistic barrier became a tactical advantage. Infiltrators might mimic uniforms and even English words, but they often betrayed themselves through mispronunciation. A Japanese soldier might understand the password but fail to pronounce it correctly under pressure, a crucial second that could mean survival or death. Marines needed tools they could trust in the pitch-black chaos, and this one worked more often than not. This strategy was rooted in real linguistic science. Japanese features only one liquid consonant, often described as falling somewhere between the English R and L. This single Japanese sound, called an alveolar tap, is neurologically processed differently from the two distinct English sounds. Native Japanese speakers, even those fluent in English, often struggle to hear and produce L and are accurately in rapid speech. It's not about physical inability. It's about how their brains categorize sounds, a pattern fixed in early childhood and notoriously difficult to rewire later in life. This distinction becomes especially evident under stress, where automatic pronunciation habits override conscious effort and betray even the most prepared infiltrators. Passwords like Lollapalooza, a slang word full of challenging L sounds, were reportedly used. According to one wartime journalist, Japanese infiltrators who pronounced the beginning as Rora were immediately identified as enemies, though the specific word appears in only one verified source. The broader practice is well documented by first-hand testimony. These passwords work because they tapped into something automatic and unconscious. An infiltrator could study maps and learn commands, but they couldn't easily override their native phonology. The Marines were not trained linguists, yet they intuitively weaponized the nuances of human speech. The stakes were high. By August 8th, the Marines had seized the island's Japanese-built airstrip, later renamed Henderson Field. It became the centerpiece of the campaign, with Japanese forces launching repeated attempts to retake it. Nighttime infiltrations were common, with Japanese soldiers creeping through dense jungle terrain, camouflaged and often moving silently. Visual ID was nearly impossible. Documents could be forged, voices could deceive. But pronunciation, particularly of challenging English sounds, offers a subtle but effective filter. In the dim light, words became weapons, and the act of speaking became an act of verification. Every syllable mattered, especially when life hung in the balance. The science behind this tactic would only be fully understood decades later. Linguistic research confirmed that Japanese speakers, even after years of immersion in English, often retained difficulty with L and R. Studies found that even Japanese residents in the U.S. for over a decade struggled to hear and reproduce the contrast, particularly under stress. One experiment even showed that Japanese speakers could distinguish the sounds in isolation, but failed to do so in natural speech. Their brains simply grouped both into one category. This cognitive constraint became a tactical tool, refined not in laboratories, but in the jungles of the South Pacific. While pronunciation testing wasn't foolproof, some infiltrators had excellent English. It proved valuable. Hurlbut noted that some tests failed when soldiers had English education, but the majority of Japanese troops did not. In at least one case, a sentry opened fire when an approaching soldier spoke English that was too perfect, a giveaway that no ordinary Marine would use such formal grammar. The familiarity of phrasing, gruff, casual, even sloppy, was a clue in itself, distinguishing the native speaker from the practiced imposter. Marines knew how Marines spoke. This practice wasn't exclusive to the Pacific. On D-Day in Europe, Allied forces used a challenge password pair Flash Thunder with welcome as a countersign, chosen specifically because German speakers struggle with the TH and W sounds. It's an ancient idea. In the Hebrew Bible, the word shibboleth was used to identify enemy tribes based on their inability to pronounce it correctly. At Guadalcanal, this biblical concept was reborn in the form of tactical linguistics, transforming language into a silent battlefield where a single sound could mean life or death. Importantly, pronunciation testing targeted language background, not ethnicity. Thousands of Japanese American soldiers served with distinction in the Pacific, particularly through the Military Intelligence Service. These Nisei soldiers, born and raised in the U.S., spoke fluent English and would have passed any L sound test effortlessly. Their service was essential, even as their families were interned back home. It served as a powerful reminder that speech patterns, not ancestry, were the true indicators of background. In war, identity could not be judged by appearance alone, but by the shape of one's syllables. Despite its success, pronunciation testing did have risks. False positives were possible, especially among non-native English speakers in Allied ranks, Filipinos, Chinese Americans, and others who spoke English with different accents. But the L-based test remained practical, fast, and effective in environments where other forms of ID failed. It didn't require technology. It couldn't easily be faked. And it exploited one of the most deeply ingrained features of human cognition, the sound patterns we absorb as children. It was a test of the tongue, not the uniform. Its effectiveness came from subtle truths buried in speech, ones a soldier might not even know they were revealing. Tie-in of language and warfare. What began as a necessity became doctrine, and what began as improvisation became insight. While the Guadalcanal campaign ended in Allied victory, with Japan retreating in early 1943, the lessons learned endured. Later operations across the Pacific, from Tarawa to Okinawa, benefited from tactics and procedures first refined on Guadalcanal's brutal battlefields. Though the full extent of pronunciation testing beyond that campaign remains unclear, its use there is firmly documented, offering a fascinating intersection of language and warfare. What began as a necessity became doctrine, and what began as improvisation became insight. Today, the story stands as a testament to innovation under pressure. Marines didn't need a linguistics degree to recognize that something as subtle as a mispronounced L could mean the difference between life and death. It was a simple, brilliant solution born from observation and adapted to a real, immediate problem, in that pronunciation testing at Guadalcanal remains a unique and compelling chapter in the history of military intelligence, one where language became both a key and a shield, a story where phonetics, combat, and human ingenuity collided, quiet proof